So good afternoon. Yeah, in the previous class I mentioned, or the last point we discussed is that for comparison with the English meter, Roman Jacobson bring to our attention the similar Russian binary verse forms. The similar Russian binary verse forms. Okay, the structure of the verse can be very thoroughly described and interpreted in terms of ancient probabilities. Up to this point we discussed. Okay, so in the classical pattern of Russian syllabic accentual verse, okay, in Russian poetry, okay, this is syllabic accentual verse. They followed syllabic accentual verse, or the popular versification is accentual versification. Okay, that is stress. Okay, that is based on stress. Okay, in this classic pattern of Russian syllabic accentual verse, we observe the following constants. These are constant. They do not change. Okay, what are they? Let us see. The number of syllables in the line from its beginning to the last downbeat is stable. Okay, the number of syllables in the line from its beginning to the last downbeat. Okay, last down bit, that means the last phonemic syllable or the last phonemic unit. Okay, which is down in general. Okay, that means, okay, it is stable. It is stable. Okay, it does not change. It is constant. So the number of syllables in the line, the number of syllables in the line are constant. And this next point, this very last downbeat always carries a word stress. And in every line, that last beat, downbeat always carries a word stress. Okay, okay, at the end of that downbeat, it carries a word stress. Okay, what does it mean? Maybe at the end, okay, the last but one syllable, may be stressed. Okay, so the third point is that a stressed syllable can't fall on the upbeat if a downbeat is fulfilled by an unstressed syllable of the same word unit. Okay, so a stressed syllable can't fall on the upbeat. Okay, so we can't find stressed syllable on the upbeat if a downbeat is fulfilled by an unstressed syllable of the same word unit. Okay, in the same word unit, okay, if the downbeat is fulfilled by an unstressed syllable of the same word unit. Okay, a stressed syllable can't fall on the upbeat. Even it may also happen at the downbeat. That particular sequence it follows either upbeat or downbeat. It follows anyone. Okay, so first of all, we should know what is meter. We should have some idea what is meter properly. So let me explain that. Meter is the basic rhythmic structure of a line within a work of poetry. What is meter? Meter is the basic rhythmic structure of a line. Okay, in a line, if we could find the rhythmic structure, that is meter. But it is within a work of poetry. Within a work of poetry, we can find that. Meter consists of two components. Meter consists of two components. One is the number of syllables. Okay, so in this metrical composition, in a line, okay, the feet are countable. Okay, 3 feet, 2 feet, or 5 feet, or 4 feet, whatever it may be. Okay, the feet are countable. So the number of syllables. Yeah, a meter consists of two components. One is number of syllables. There may be a particular number. In each line, a particular number is followed in the meter. Second component is that a pattern of emphasis on those syllables. On those syllables, okay, which are equal in number in a line, which are equal in number in a line. For example, 5. Okay, then a pattern of emphasis in that line, okay, on 5 syllables, for example, let us say, for each syllable, okay, this is stress pattern, this is a pattern of emphasis, that is the stress on the syllable, on those syllables. There is a pattern of emphasis, stress on those syllables. Okay, so what if the first syllable in a word is stressed? If the first syllable in a word is stressed, then again in the next word, again the first syllable is stressed. Likewise, it follows a particular pattern. For example, if the second syllable of a word is stressed, again in the next word, in the same line, in the next word, again the second syllable is stressed in a word. Okay, a line of poetry can be broken into feet. We can divide a line of poetry into feet because we can count the syllables. We can count the syllables, that is words. Okay, syllables which may form a word. We can count those syllables. We can count those syllables. That's why we can break the poetic line into number of feet, which are individual units. In that feet, those feet or that particular foot is an individual unit within a line of poetry. So in metrically composed poetic line, we can find a number of feet. Okay, each foot is an individual unit in the line of metrical composition. We should not forget that. Okay, so a foot of poetry has a specific number of syllables. Even in that foot of poetry, in that foot, we can find a specific number of syllables and a specific pattern of emphasis. We can find, and a specific number of syllables we can find. As we discussed earlier, meter consists of two components. Okay, one is number, another one is a pattern of emphasis, that is stress. Okay, so individually every foot as an individual unit, okay, has a specific number of syllables and a specific pattern of emphasis, right? So in English, okay, the common meters are, let me introduce the common meters. If there is only one foot in a line of poem, then it is called monometer. If there are 2 feet, we can find, okay, diameter. Okay, diameter. Okay, then if we find 3 feet in a line of poem, we call trimeter. Okay, if we find 4 feet, we call it tetrameter, tetrameter. If we find 5 feet, okay, five individual units, 5 feet, okay, feet as an individual unit, which consists of some syllables, okay, some number of syllables. Okay, so 5 feet, if we find 5 feet, then it is pentameter. If we find 6 feet, it is hexameter. If we find 7 feet, it is a heptameter. If we find 8 feet, it is octameter. It is octameter, right? So dear students, we can find like this. Okay, so most probably in English poetry, okay, we can find 5 feet line, 5 feet line. Okay, that's why pentameter. There may be iambic pentameter or trochaic or anapest, whatever it may be. Okay, so iambic pentameter contains 5 ems, okay, per line. So if it is iambic pentameter, then we can find 5 feet in each line, 5 feet in each line, okay, for a total of 10 syllables per line. Okay, so we can find okay, 5 feet and 10 syllables in each line. Each feet may consist of two syllables. Each feet may consist of two syllables. Okay, likewise we can find 10 syllables per line. Okay, every even number syllabus is stressed. This is the point we have to find. Every even numbered syllabus is stressed. In iambic pentameter, we can find this fact. Okay, the second syllable, the fourth syllable, sixth syllable, eighth syllable, 10th syllable, 12th syllable, likewise up to 5, as we have 5 feet, up to 10 syllables we can find, for example. Okay, then in iambic pentameter, we can find each even number is stressed. Each even number syllable is stressed. Okay, so for example, in the first feet, okay, there are two syllables. We stress on the second syllable. Okay, even number in the sense 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, like that. Okay, in some cases, in some poetry, in some poetic lines, we can find odd numbers may be stressed. Odd number syllable stress may be there. If it is so, in the first feet, the first syllable may be stressed. The first syllable may be stressed. Likewise here, we can say, in this context, we can say, okay, dear students, iambic pentameter contains 5 ems per line for a total of 10 syllables per line. Okay, every even numbered syllable is stressed. Okay, so each of Shakespeare's sonnets, such as 154 sonnet, features rhyming iambic pentameter. Okay, that features, okay, if you observe Shakespeare sonnets, okay, you can find, okay, the rhyming in each line of sonnets of Shakespeare, we can find the rhyming, such as in each poem, in each sonnet, we can find the rhyming like this. Okay, that is AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. What does it mean? Okay, the first line, the word at the end of the first line has rhyming, with the third, and the word at the the end word of the third line. Okay, the word at the end of the third line. These two may have, or these two are in rhyming. These two are in rhyming. Again, the second word, the word at the end of the second line may have rhyming with the word at the end of the fourth line. Okay, so AB, CD, EF, GG. Just think, there are in sonnet there are 14 lines. In sonnet there are 14 lines. Okay, here A, one line, B, second line, A, third line, B, fourth line, C, fifth line, D, sixth line, C, again C, seventh line, D, eighth line, and E, ninth, and F, 10th line. Again E, 11th line, and F, 12th line. Okay, 13th line G, 14th line G. Okay, at the end we can find the couplets which have rhyming, So here, likewise in the meter, especially in this Russian, which can be compared with this English meter, that is accentual. Okay, here this is also what we discussed as a meter is also accentual. Okay, meter, accentual versification, we can see. So likewise, dear students, okay, of course, he made a lot of discussion. He discussed a lot with this Russian binary verse, Okay, so study personally so that you can have the comprehensive idea on that. Already I share you the text. Okay, so let us move to discuss furthermore. Okay, far from being an abstract theoretical scheme, this is all the theoretical scheme. It is not simple thing to compose like that, dear students. Having every count of the syllable and the feet, okay, and the stress mark on the either on even number or on odd number. Okay, likewise, it is not simple thing to compose like that. Okay, so far from being an abstract, moreover, this is all the system is an abstract, okay, theoretical scheme. Then meter, or in more explicit terms, verse design, okay, meter, or we can say another word we can use is that verse design. Okay, for example, you may consider the structure of your sentence as a unit. The structure of your sentence as a unit to compose or to prepare some sentences. Okay, for example, simple present tense, subject V1 or V5 plus object. This is a structure. Or we can say this is a sentence design. In the same manner, okay, so in the meter, that is in metrical line of the poetry, or in metrical line of the poem, okay, in explicit terms, we can call it as verse design. So this verse design underlines the structure of any single line. So how do we study the verse design? How do we study the verse design? We study the verse design, okay, by studying the structure of any single line. Okay, so how can we understand the poetic effect in verse? Okay, each line in versification is important. We consider one line as verse, but one line can't make a poetry, can't make a poem, One line can't make a poem, but one line can make a verse. One line can make a verse because it follows the metrical composition. Okay, the number of feet. Okay, Likewise, so here the verse design underlies the structure of any single line, or in logical terminology, any single verse instance. Any single verse instance. Okay, what is this single line? What is this single line of poem? Okay, that may be in logical terminology. Okay, in plain terminology, we can call single verse instance. Single verse instance. Okay, so we can find instance in the sense here a sample or an example. Okay, a sample or an example. So here we can find any single verse instance. For our convenience, we can call. Okay, so verse design. Okay, verse design in the broader sense, metrical line. In the broader sense, metrical line. Then we use the verse design. Now we are using verse instance. A verse instance. Verse design is also abstract. That is also theoretical, not practical. That is also abstract, not concrete. Then what is concrete? The example of the poetic line is concrete. The example of the poetic line is concrete. Okay, or the sample of the poetic line is concrete. Okay, that can be studied. Without that sample, that real poetic line, we can't explain the abstract design of the verse. The abstract design of the verse. That's why in logical terminology, we can consider any single verse instance. Any single verse instance, right? So design and instance are correlative concepts. Design abstract and instance practical, or we can say the concrete. Okay, for example, let me tell you subject v1 or v5 plus object, that is abstract. She comes to college, that is example, or that is sample, we can say. She comes to college, that is the sample. But what is the abstract? Subject v1 or v5 plus object. Okay, in this case it is v5, comes v5. Likewise, design, that is abstract conception, and instance, that is sample or example, or these two are correlative concepts. Correlative concepts, one is dependent on the other. One is dependent on the other. Okay, so instance is dependent on the design and design is dependent on the instance. Okay, so the verse design determines the invariant features of the verse instances. Invariant features of the verse instances. What are the invariant features? For example, in case of this structure, simple present tense, okay, subject is invariant. All the time that should be a subject. But in practical, in example, in the place of that subject, we can substitute any word. Okay, subject is not limited to any particular word. In the place of subject, we can substitute any word. Okay, that's why we can say subject is invariant. At the same time, that noun Rama or Sita, or that pronoun he, she, it, whatever it may be, they are variants. They are variants, right? For example, that's why here the verse design determines the invariance. The verse design determines the invariant features of the verse instances. Invariant features are the verse instances, such as number of feet. Okay, such as the number of syllables in that line, and such as the pattern of emphasis. Likewise, they are invariable. They are invariants. They don't change. But in that place, in the first feet, there are 5 feet. In the first feet, all the time, in all the lines, we can't find the same feet. That means the same word in the first feet. Okay, in the first feet. Okay, 5 feet in the sense 5 blocks. In each block, we can replace other words in the next line. In the next line, we do not, or we may not need, we do not need to use, or we may not use the same word what we use in the first line, first feet. In the second line, we do not use what we do not use in the second line what we use in the first line at a particular feet. For example, in the first line at the third feet, you might have used, for example, okay, miss or mind, for example, mind. At the third block, you might have used mind. In the second line, at the third block, you need not use the same word mind. Instead of that, you can use any other word. Okay, the block is invariant, but the word in that block is not invariant. Okay, so the verse design determines the invariant features of the verse instances and sets up the limit of the variations. The limit of the variations. Okay, but this verse design sets up the limit of the variations. Sets up the limit of the variation. That means it controls. That design will control, the usage of the words, the usage of the words. Okay, in the place of rather, or in the place of such unit, or in the place of such note, you can't use 5-6 syllabic word, 5 or 6 syllabic word, Anjaneya, you can't use that. Okay, if it is a two syllable space, if there is a 2 syllable space, then you have to use only 2 syllable word. You have to use only 2 syllable word. Okay, for example, in a poetic line, the musician composed Tana, Tandana, like that. Or else, for example, Sasa, Sasa. Okay, if it is Sasa, okay, in that process, if it is Sasa or Sari, for example, Sari, Sasa, or whatever it may be. Okay, Swaras, those Swaras. Okay, so Sari, not Sari, Sari. Then you have to use Hari, you have to use Vari. Okay, but you can't use in that Sari, in that note, sorry, small note. Okay, you can't use a lengthy word such as Goduma in place of Vari with a 2 syllable, with a 2 syllable note. In that place, you can't use Goduma, or you can't use Mamidikaya, you can't use Aratikaya. That won't set, that won't fix in that place. Okay, that's why this verse design, limits, the variations. Okay, it controls the variations. Okay, so the verse design is a much wider linguistic phenomenon. The verse design is a much wider linguistic phenomenon. Okay, so this verse design is also a linguistic phenomenon. Okay, Chartman states that the meter exists as a system outside the language. Okay, Chartman, a critic, said that the meter exists as a system outside the language. Okay, meter appears also in other arts dealing with the time sequence. Okay, he said that meter exists as a system outside the language. That's why they separated. That's why the linguists separated this poetics from linguistics. Okay, but this Roman Jakobson, he says another point. Meter appears also in other arts. Meter appears also in other arts dealing with the time sequence. Dealing with the time sequence. Okay, so in that chronomic sequence, we can find, okay, such meter in other arts also. Such meter in other arts also. Meter means simply a proper measurement. Remember, meter means simply a proper measurement. For any type of art, there is a particular measurement. There is a particular measurement. Okay, so if the painter take a place, first he may plan a particular place. In that place, he may design, he may plan other aspects, or he may plan within that space, he may plan a particular picture or a portrait. Okay, what can we understand from this point? Okay, if the painter draws, okay, a man's portrait, okay, then he should not make one hand too long and one hand too short. They have some measurement. They have some measurement. They should be equal. They should be equal. He does not measure with the scale, but with the eye, he may measure. Oh, okay, he may estimate how long the hand should be, and both hands should be, and how long both legs should be. Okay, he should not draw one leg too long and one leg too short, because for everything there is a measurement. There is a measurement. That's why Roman Jakobson, he says that, okay, meter appears also in other arts dealing with the time sequence. Dealing with the time sequence. Okay, that's why. Let us add that no linguistic property of the verse design. That's why this Roman Jakobson says that. Okay, though the Chapman says that the meter exists as a system outside the language, though he said. Now this Roman Jakobson says that. Let us add that no linguistic property of the verse design should be disregarded. Should be disregarded. We should not neglect. We should not neglect any linguistic property of the verse design. Okay, even this verse design also has some linguistic property, or many linguistic properties, we can say. We should not neglect any one of those, okay, properties, linguistic properties. Okay, properties in the sense here, characteristics, linguistic characteristics. Thus, it would be an unfortunate mistake. That's why he says, it would be an unfortunate mistake to deny the constitute value of intonation in English meters. We should not deny the constitute value of intonation in English meter. In English meter. Okay, so it would be an unfortunate mistake if we deny the constitutive value of the intonation in English meter. We should not deny, because we are as a linguist, or at least for the linguist, nothing is disregarded, nothing to be disregarded in linguistic properties of verse design. Linguistic properties of verse design, right? So the verse design is embodied in verse instances. The verse design is practical, or the verse design is visible in instances. The verse design is visible in instances. That means in the samples or examples. Okay, so a variation of verse instances, within a given poem must be strictly distinguished from the variable delivery instances. Okay, he says that a variation of verse instances within a given poem must be strictly distinguished from the variable delivery instances. Okay, delivery instances in the sense, delivery in the sense recitation. Okay, when you read the poem, your delivery may be wrong. You may have different deliveries, but on paper, that particular variation of verse instances are common, or they are fixed. These should be distinguished from, okay, the variable delivery instances. Okay, for example, in one movie, in recent movies of Allu Arjun, Samajavaragamana. Okay, by changing the tempo, how they changed the song. Okay, the same lines by changing the tempo. Okay, in olden days, okay, it is Samajavaragam or some extent. Samaja Varagamana, like that. Whatever it means. I'm not sure. I'm not a good singer. Okay. So, but by changing the tempo, Samajavaragamana, there Samajavaragamana, like that. Samaja. But here, the tempo is reduced. Samajavaragamana. What does it mean? By reducing the time, we can deliver the same line with a different intonation, with a different effect we can deliver. But here he says that a variation of verse instances within a given poem must be strictly, okay, distinguished from the variable delivery instances. The verse shape of a poem remains completely independent of its variable delivery. The verse shape of a poem remains completely independent of its variable delivery. Right? So, dear students, no doubt, verse is primarily a recurrent figure of sound. This is the point you have to remember. No doubt, verse is primarily a recurrent figure of sound. Okay. So, any attempt to confine such poetic conventions as meter, alliteration, or rhyme to the sound level are speculative reasons without any empirical justification. He says that we should not any attempt to confine such poetic conventions. Okay, those poetic conventions should not be confined to meter, alliteration, or rhyme to the sound level, or speculative reasonings. Okay, without any empirical justification. Okay, what is his intention? What is the intention of the Roman Jacobson in this point? He says that we should not limit that poetic convention to the metrical composition. That is metrical composition in poem. Okay, so it may be any kind of verse. All the time we need not to find that particular, okay, poetic convention or poetic effect. We should not confine to alliteration, or we should not confine to any rhyme. Okay, even though there is no rhyme at the end of the line with other, the word at the end of the line with other word which is at the end of the line, even though there is no such rhyming, still we can find the poetic effect. The poetic effect. If there are only two lines in a particular verse, okay, for example, slokas, two-line slokas, or Kabir Das dohes. Okay, in dohes, Kabir Das wrote two lines. Okay, so rhyme by definition is based on a regular recurrent of equivalent phonemes. Regular recurrent of equivalent phonemes. Regularly, what is rhyme? Rhyme can be defined, okay, or rhyme by the definition is based on a regular recurrent of equivalent phonemes. Equivalent phonemes. Okay, September is rhymed with November. Okay, September is not in rhyme with June. Okay, these two words are not rhyming words. Okay, they have the equivalent, that is equal phonemes. Okay, or phonemic groups, equal phonemes or phonemic groups, we can say. So rhyme necessarily involves this, but it is not all the time the fact that if we have two sounds, which are sound alike or which can be pronounced alike, can't be rhyming words. There should be a semantic relationship. There should be a semantic relationship between rhyming units. There should be a semantic relationship between rhyming words or rhyming units. For example, Hopkins fourfold rhyming. Fourfold rhyme is an agreement of Hopkins. Okay, he explained fourfold rhyming. In that he said that, okay, rhyme is an agreement. Rhyme is an agreement of two nouns. For example, he mentioned kind and mind. Kind and mind. These two are in rhyme, but the word kind is not in rhyme with blind, or it is not in rhyme with find. Okay, see, kind and mind, these two are in rhyming, but these two words with any one of the other two words, that is blind and find. Okay, this four seems alike. This four may be pronounced alike. Okay, apparently they seems rhyming words. These four are in rhyming, but the fact is that for the last two words, blind and find, there is no semantic relationship. There is no semantic relationship. Then how can you understand there is a semantic relationship between, okay, mind and kind? Okay, what is mind? Manasu in Telugu. Then what is kind? Okay, kindness, that is jali kaligina. Okay, jali ekkada kalugutundi? Manasulo kalugutundi. Jali ekkada kalugutundi? Manasulo kalugutundi. That's why mind and kind are related. That's why mind and kind related semantically. Related semantically. That is the point here. Okay, so that's why we can find, okay, kind is an emotion of mind. Kind is an emotion of mind. Okay, and another point he mentioned is that ransoms, ransom, 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 rans. Okay, why suggestion that? Ran suggested that ransom, ransom, ransom suggested that the meter and meaning process, the meter and meaning process is the organic act of poetry. Okay, the meter and meaning process is the organic act of poetry. Okay, there should be a meter, but it should be a meaningful. There should be a meter, but it should be meaningful. Okay, the meaningful units can be composed as meter. The meaningful, okay, individual units such as feet, can be considered as meter. Each feet should be a meaningful word. Each feet should be a meaningful word. Okay. The interaction between meter and meaning, the interaction between meter and meaning, and the arrangement of tropes cease to be the free and individual, and unpredictable parts of the poetry. Okay, once, yeah, the interaction between these two and the arrangement of tropes based on the interaction between this, these two, okay, we will compose, okay, the tropes or the parts into a metrical line. Then, if once we arrange them, it ceases to be the free and individual, unpredictable part of the poetry. It becomes the free and individual part of the poetry. Okay, but the problem is that in poetic line, the problem is that ambiguity, or bafflement, or double meanings. Okay, or since yeah, the word since having two or more meanings. Such ambiguity is an intrinsic, inalienable character of any self-focused message. Briefly, a corollary feature of poetry. A corollary feature of poetry. So, in the poetry, okay, ambiguity is an intrinsic. Intrinsic means internal. So, intrinsic means internal. Within the poem, we can find that bafflement. Okay, that's why when we take a word in a poem, if that word has two or more meanings, then we may all the time we may confuse what meaning should be taken, Such an ambiguity is an intrinsic, inalienable character of any poetry. Okay, so in the poetry we can find such bafflement, but it is in our hands to decide what meaning to be adopted based on that particular context, based on the evidences that are available in the poem. Okay, so that's why when we interpret the poem, we should read the poem from the first word to the last word. Then only we can interpret properly. Okay, in poetry, any conspicuous similarity in sound is evaluated in respect to similarity or dissimilarity in meaning. Okay, in the sound. Okay, any conspicuous similarity in sound is evaluated. Okay, such similarities if we could find in sound, okay, then that can be evaluated in respect to similarity or dissimilarity in meaning. Okay, whether the meaning we have to decide whether a particular meaning is similar or not. Based on the similarity, dissimilarity, we will decide what meaning can be taken. Okay, any analysis of poetic sound texture. Okay, any analysis of poetic sound texture. Texture means here pattern. Texture means pattern. Even in painting also there are certain textures. Okay, so here, okay, any analysis of poetic sound texture must consistently take into account, okay, the phonological structure of the given language. Okay, if you want to analyze the poetic sound texture, then you should analyze the phonological structure of a given language. Okay, so here try to understand this point carefully. Poetic sound texture of the poem is to be analyzed is to be analyzed by taking into consideration the phonological structure of the given language. Where do we find phonological structure? In linguistics. So it is mandatory to include linguistic structure. It is mandatory to include linguistic structure. Okay, any analysis of poetic sound texture must consistently take into account the phonological structure of a given language. And beside the oral code, okay, also the hierarchy of the phonological distinctions in the given poetic convention. In that given poetic convention, or in that given poetic line, okay, in that given poetic line, we have to analyze, okay, the oral code. At the same time, hierarchy of phonological distinctions. Hierarchy of phonological distinctions. Okay, that's why it is inevitable to study the poetic effect or the poetic sound pattern in linguistics. These two are not separate. Okay, Hopkins called verseless composition the prosaic variety of verbal art. Hopkins called okay, the verseless composition, the prosaic variety of verbal art. Okay, poetic variety and prosaic variety, prose piece. Okay, in the prose piece, according to Hopkins, if it is called prose, if it is verseless, if there is no versification, if there are no verses or poetic lines, then it is prose. Okay, the study of poetic tropes, as Raman Jacobson mentioned, the study of poetic tropes has been directed mainly toward metaphor. Okay, in his discussion, okay, the study of poetic tropes, the study of poetic units are directed to the study of metaphor. Okay, in poetic lines, okay, we can find such metaphor. What is metaphor? Okay, yeah, direct submission of something into another thing. Submission of something into another thing. We do not use the words like or as in case of simile. Okay, in the simile, we compare two things by using the words, okay, two facts or two things by using the words as, like, okay, such words. Okay, he is like a line. He is like a line. That is simile. He is a line. That is metaphor. Direct submission between two objects, or direct submission of one thing in another one. He is a line. He is a line. Directly we are submitting him as a line, or we are directly submitting him into the line. Okay, that's why the study of poetic tropes has been directed mainly toward metaphor. Okay, even metonymic structures are explored. Okay, what are metonymic structures? Okay, metonymy, simple. Okay, the shortest submission, the shortest form of metaphor. Okay, here enter the line. We are not saying he is a line. Here enter the line. Simply, instead of he is a line, we are using the word line directly. Metonymic, that is metonymic usage. Okay, so Even metonymic structures are explored in poetry, in poetic line. Okay, even metonymic structures are explored. Okay, by this Roman Jacobson. He explored these metonymic structures also. Okay, anyhow, poeticalness, poeticalness. Okay, or we can say this the being poetic is not a supplementation of discourse. It is not a supplement of discourse with a rhetorical adornment, but a total re-evaluation of the discourse. A total re-evaluation of the discourse. We are totally changing the discourse and re-evaluating that discourse of all its components whatsoever. By using all its components whatsoever, okay, in this poeticalness, it is okay, total re-evaluation of the discourse. Okay, so he defines that poeticalness is a total re-evaluation of the discourse, right? So in poetry, okay, in poetry, any verbal element in poetry, any verbal element is converted into a figure of poetic speech. Okay, in poetry, what do we find? Any verbal element is converted into a figure of poetic speech. Okay, if you take any verbal message, if you take any verbal line, surely we can convert that verbal line into a poetic line. Okay, we can convert the prose line into a poetic line. We can convert the general statement or the general sentence into a poetic line. Okay, such transferability is there. Okay, so Jacobson, he says, my attempt to vindicate the right and the duty of linguistics to direct the investigation of verbal art in all its compasses and extent can come to a conclusion. He recommends or he vindicates the right and the duty of linguistics to direct the investigation of the verbal art. He proposes that the linguist should investigate the verbal art in all its compasses, all the aspects. Okay, all the aspects. Verbal art, the linguistics should investigate the verbal art in all its compasses and extent. Okay, up to the poetic extent, it has to study. Whatever the extent it has, up to that, the linguistics should study, or the linguist of the linguistics should study. Okay, to come to a conclusion. Okay, if the poet Ransom is right, that poetry is a kind of language. Okay, Ransom said that. Earlier we discussed who proposed, who suggested the meter and meaning process is the organic act of poetry. Okay, if he is right, if his statement is right, that what is his statement? The poetry is a kind of language. The poetry is also a kind of language. Okay, linguistics being the study of language, how it ignores the poetic language, because the poetry is also a kind of language. If it is so, how the linguist may ignore, or how the linguist can ignore this linguistic aspect of poetic line? linguistic aspect of poetic line. Okay, that's why. That's why. Okay, Raman Jacobson argues that, okay, the linguistics should study the poetry. The linguistics should study the poetic as the poetic function of the language, the poetic function of the language. Okay, so he says that the linguist whose field is any kind of language. What is the field of this linguist? Any kind of language. If it is any kind of language, then the linguist may and must include the poetry in his study. In his study. Okay, the linguist whose field is any kind of language. Okay, so what is the field of this linguistics? What field he studies? Any kind of language. If any kind of language he studies, then why shouldn't he include the poetic language? That's why Raman Jacobson says that linguist may and must include poetry in his study. He says that he must include poetry in his study. Okay, so we can say here this poetic study, the poetic function, the study of the poetic function. The study of the poetic function is an inevitable part or an inevitable aspect of linguistic study. An inevitable aspect of linguistic study. If it is so, surely the poetics is an integral part of linguistics. That is his first statement. The poetry is an integral part of linguistics, right? So the final statement he mentions, is the statement of Hollander. The statement of Hollander. Hollander states that there seems to be no reason for trying to separate the literary from the oral linguistics. Hollander, Hollandar, Hollander states that there seems to be no reason for trying to separate the literary study from the oral linguistics. The literary study from the oral linguistics. Okay, there is no reason. If we are trying to separate. Okay, that's why based on these discussions, based on these arguments of Raman Jacobson, okay, finally we can conclude that okay, the poetics, the study of poetic function, the study of poetic function of the language, the poetic language is part of the linguistic study, is a part of linguistic study. Okay, so he says that the poetics is an integral part of linguistics. Poetics is an integral part of linguistics. Okay, this is how Raman Jacobson he established the relationship between the poetics and linguistics. Earlier, the scholars they separated these two fields. They separated these two and they considered these two are different fields. But now, this with the effort of the Raman Jacobson, now the poetics, the study of poetic function, comes under the study of linguistics, comes under the study of language. That is the linguistic study. Okay, dear students. So this is the text of Raman Jacobson's okay, linguistics and poetics. Okay, so this is the conclusion of the topic. Okay, so next I will tell you what topic I am going to start. Okay, thank you for patient listening.